So welcome to Engaging and Interacting with Students Online. I'm Helen Graves, College of the Canyons instructional designer. You may also know me from my role as an ID with the CVC and @ONE, which stands for the California Virtual Campus. California Virtual. I never remember whether it's campus or college. Anyhow, and @ONE is the professional development wing of the CVC. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about ways to create an engaging learning environment, as well as meeting guidelines for interaction and regular substantive contact, we'll get to that in your online course. And by online, I'm actually referring to fully asynchronous, online live, hybrid, or even HyFlex. I always like to start with the why, because understanding that really helps us see the value of whatever idea or behavior change or whatever is being suggested. A very significant challenge for online students is that they can feel isolated and disconnected when they can't see or interact with their instructor and classmates, when learning is structured so that they kind of feel like they're just sitting alone on a computer doing homework. It doesn't sound very enticing. So there's been a lot of research, and I'm not going to name all it, just give you a little list to show you a few that have shown that engagement and a sense of connection are crucial to successful online learning, particularly in the asynchronous modality, both from an emotional and a cognitive perspective. And before anyone poo-poos talk of emotions with regard to learning, think about it. We humans are emotional animals. Our emotions are always present, and whether we're conscious of it or not, they're always impacting our experiences. So why would we think a student's emotions are suddenly checked at the door when they enter a classroom, whether it's physical or virtual? Back in 1988, Ellis and Ashbrook's research found that emotions direct a student toward or away from learning matters in a learning environment. And then in 2011, Pekrin et al. Showed that positive emotions can predict creative thinking and reflecting. We like those in our students, don't we? Thereby supporting academic performance, while, not surprisingly, negative emotions were more associated with lower levels of performance. And in terms of cognition, it seems to me, at least, the very purpose of a teacher is to create the space and provide the structure for learning to happen. Information doesn't stick when it's simply passively received and nothing further is done to promote understanding or recall, the old in one ear and out the other. So by actively engaging with content, it gets students' attention. It's actually what gets those brain synapses firing, and it helps the information go from short-term to long-term memory. The basic tenet of creating engagement is to keep front of mind this idea of interaction. How can you foster interaction beyond reading text on a page or sitting and listening to a recorded lecture? Interaction in this context is more of a cognitive experience than a physical action. So I'm not talking about having students click a button or do a drag and drop activity. Technically, those are interactive activities, but it's not the physical action itself that promotes comprehension and retention. We want to incorporate cognitive interaction. You want to get students involved with and thinking about your content. It's the thinking part that's important. So here are a few ideas for increasing interaction in terms of cognition. You can provide a variety of content in a variety of modalities. And this is supported by the principles of universal design for learning. Giving people choice instantly increases engagement. As an example, lots of people like to watch mini lecture videos. I am actually the opposite. I'm fine with edutainment kinds of videos. But if I really need to learn something, do not make me watch a video. My brain just has a hard time going deep when I'm listening. I would always rather read than watch. And then there are the opposite, people that would always rather watch than read in order to learn. So by varying modalities, we're increasing the engagement level. So you can make it a point to begin creating a library of content that you can use, your textbook, journal articles, micro lectures, content related podcasts or videos, interactive learning objects. And you don't even have to create it all. You can swap content and resources with colleagues in your same discipline, or even use student created content with their permission, of course, that may be, or student curated content that is related to whatever topic you've got in mind. Another idea is to give them the why. And we started off with this. Offer a short introduction to the module or the unit or the concept, explaining how it relates to the course goals, how it relates to their learning and or their future. Basically, here's why I chose this video, article, song. Here's why this topic is important. Here's how I think it's going to impact your learning. If we don't know the purpose or the relevance of something, we're much less likely to pay attention to it. It just feels like extraneous information. Another thing to do is to encourage questions, discussion, and collaboration. You can create a space for and actually hold the expectation of deeper thinking. I just heard an idea from an instructor that in her discussion instructions, she asks students, after she tells them how she wants to respond to the prompt, she asks them to end their initial post with a question for their peers that takes the original prompt deeper or in a new direction. She said her classes have had some really great discussions since she started this practice. Some instructors think discussion and collaboration can't really happen effectively in the online environment. Pish tosh. There are tools like VoiceThread, Padlet, AnswerGarden. We've got Zoom breakout rooms, Google Docs, or the groups area in Canvas for collaboration. And in fact, those actually do a better job of allowing everyone to participate, not just the confident and vocal students, as tends to happen when you're in a face-to-face class. Another thing I love to talk about in terms of creating or increasing engagement is the idea of metacognition, having an awareness of one's own thought processes. It's an important skill and a really strong motivator for learning. So you want to encourage reflection and self-assessment. Learning how to think, how to learn is particularly important when teachers are no longer the main source of information and knowledge, as is happening as we shift to an online, you're no longer the sage on the stage. And so it really is useful to help students learn how to think, how to analyze, how to reflect on what they're doing. You can ask them to reflect on their progress in the course and with your content. You can ask them to identify areas of mastery and areas of improvement with something like a clearest and muddiest point activity. After teaching a concept or a skill, you can have them answer questions like, what have I just learned? What helped me learn it? What do I still need to learn? And that could be done as an individual or a small group discussion or a reflection they turn in through Canvas, any of that kind of stuff. But these kinds of metacognitive questions could be standalone, or they can be incorporated into an existing assignment or quiz. And that can help both you identify if a student is off track in some way so that you can offer guidance and resources to focus their learning, and help the students figure out and identify where maybe they're misunderstanding or getting off track. Let me share a resource in chat that may be helpful to you. It is recommendations to increase student engagement. I'll put it in chat. And then another one I found called 10 Ways to Overcome Barriers to Engagement. They're both fairly short little anecdotal kinds of articles. They're not, in-depth research, scholarly stuff. but both have ideas that can be useful in terms of what we just talked about. And now, because RSI is becoming a big topic, and I believe College of the Canyons is going to shortly be going through an accreditation visit around regular and substantive interaction, we're going to shift over and look specifically at the idea of regular and substantive interaction, also called RSI. And the idea behind it is establishing instructor presence and building an online learning community that can help address the issue of isolation that we talked about earlier and increase student success. The California Ed Code refers to it as regular effective contact, or REC, and the feds call it regular and substantive interaction, or RSI. By whatever name, it's an important consideration as you design and teach your course. Why is it important? Procedurally, it's important because there's a regulatory distinction between a correspondence course and a distance education or online course, and that distinction is interaction. Per Ed Code, online courses are to be the virtual equivalent of face-to-face courses, which means they therefore qualify for financial aid and apportionment, as well as articulating to subsequent four-year college enrollments. Correspondence courses do not meet those guidelines, so they do not qualify for those financial aid and articulating and all that kind of stuff. So a correspondence style course isn't going to cut it. And as we said, interaction is the distinction between the two. A couple of years ago, Title V was changed to require not only instructor to student interaction, but also that instructors include regular opportunities for student to student interaction. And even beyond regulatory guidelines, an important reason to include interaction in your course is the important role in the instructional process of interaction, of feeling engaged and being involved with the content, the instructor, the peers. Now, it may be true that model students, those who are self-directed, highly motivated, technically savvy, they may not need much instructor presence to be successful in an online course. However, I think all of us are aware that many of our community college students don't fall into that category. They may not yet have the necessary knowledge, skills, or attitudes to be successful in an online environment without an additional level of structured support that the regular interaction can provide. The question is how to do it that effectively. So College of the Canyons RSI FAQs specifies the following list of descriptors. Instructors are to initiate contact with students. They are to provide opportunities for regular and substantive interaction. And they are to enable students to participate in academically related activities. So regular and substantive interaction can be accomplished in any number of ways. For example, participating in discussion forums that are academic in nature. Synchronous learning sessions, like live via Zoom, for example. Providing meaningful feedback on academic assignments and academically related announcements. Now, this probably sounds familiar, and that's because there's a direct overlap between the idea of engagement and RSI. If you're creating an engaging and interactive learning environment in your online course, RSI pretty much takes care of itself. But for accreditation purposes, it's important that you're aware of specific guidelines and requirements that are associated with RSI. So for example, RSI talks about meaningful feedback and academically related announcements. Meaningful or academically related means you're not just saying, hey, good job. The feedback is specific and actionable. And the announcement isn't just a reminder about tomorrow's quiz. It's providing a summary of the unit or explaining a troublesome concept or some other content-specific reference that's intended to guide student learning. So here's an outline of what a well-designed RSI plan might look like. you can send a welcome message the first day of your course, or even better, before the course begins, so they have a chance to explore your orientation module ahead of time. You have the ability in the College of the Canyons instance of Canvas to set course dates in your settings area of the course shell, so that you can actually have the course open before the actual term date, if you want to give students a chance to explore your syllabus or your orientation module or anything like that. You don't have to open up the whole, all the other modules, just the ones you want them to get a little sneak peek preview of. It's a good idea when you send this welcome email to send it via email rather than through Canvas, because not all students may have confirmed their Canvas account, especially if they're new to the college. And so they may not yet be set up to receive notifications or inbox messages right in Canvas. I'm actually going to show you a resource. It's something I created as part of my At One work with CVC, but it's a public resource for all faculty in our California Community College system. I think you'll find it helpful. It's called Course Design Resources, and I'm going to put the link in the chat. It's always hard for me to talk and type at the same time. So this follows the structure of the CVC course design rubric, which is guidance for faculty in our system on how to increase the quality of their online courses. And so when you're in this public shell and you go to the modules area, you're going to see various sections and then specific items with different topics. And so if we go to section B, you're going to find all about interaction. And on B1, we've got pre-course contact. And I just want to show you, so when you go here, you'll know what you're looking at. It gives you an explanation of what we're talking about when we say pre-course contact. It gives you the why is it important? And then on the tips and examples page, it gives you some either tips or examples. And so in this case, there are 2 example pre-course messages just to give you a starting point. I mean, why reinvent the wheel when you don't have to? And so you're welcome to use either of these as a model for what you might send out to your own students. And you'll see where it's red, that's where you'd put in your own information, or where it's yellow, that might be a link to your course or your syllabus or whatever. I am a big fan of the CASE method, copy and share everything. So please feel free to customize either of these examples or come up with your own. So at a minimum, you're going to want to have this message, whoops, Helen, you silly goose. You're going to want to have this include a warm and friendly welcome, login details to Canvas, tech and or distance ed support contact information, and then anything else you feel is really important for students to know before they start the class without overwhelming them. So things like what textbook and where to buy it, week 1 requirements, any of those kinds of things. I've had people say they're adults, they shouldn't need me to baby them. Why? This sounds inconsequential to me that I should include that stuff. I'm going to tell you a little story about my first semester in my master's program a couple of years ago. It was an online program at one of our CSUs, and I was enrolled in 2 courses while working full-time for the CVC. Both my instructors, bless their hearts, sent out a pre-course welcome message, but neither of them included login details for getting into the learning management system, which was Blackboard at that college. They both basically just said, see you in the course on our first day, without any useful information about logging in or textbooks or DE support or anything. I spent almost a half hour trying to figure out how to log into the school's LMS. I looked all over. I Googled it. I looked on the college website. I couldn't find anything. So I finally wrote them both and asked if they would please share the login URL with me. And one replied back saying, oh, I just assumed everyone was a continuing undergraduate student and they already knew that. Hey, way to make me feel welcome and acknowledged as a new student to the college. My point is, I'm a self-confident, educated person. So I knew it wasn't my fault that I couldn't log in. My response was to get irritated and ask for help at the unnecessary hurdle. But many of our students feel very uncertain about their legitimacy as college students. They're experiencing the imposter syndrome. And so they may well have interpreted the lack of login details to mean, uh-oh, I should already know that. Obviously, I don't belong here. So it's just exactly those little inconsequential things that can have a real impact on our students' experience. May I caution you not to make the pre-course message as lengthy and dense as a syllabus. This is intended to just be a welcoming message to engage your students, get them excited to start. A very lengthy tome is likely going to have the opposite effect. Another piece of your RSI plan is to give students an explanation of how and when communication is going to occur. Let them know how and when you'll be communicating and interacting with them in terms of discussions, announcements, feedback, etc. What can they expect from you? This can be in your syllabus, or I think an even better method is to create a separate page in your orientation or getting started module. We've included an example in the College of the Canyons template shell. In the orientation module, you'll find a page titled Communication, and it's similar to what I showed you before. It's like a template that you can then customize to include in and maybe send out, though probably not send out, just have it in your module. But it's got all the various ways you may be communicating with students. And so you can then just customize so it fits exactly what you plan to do. The idea here is to make sure students know what to expect regarding your participation in the course. Much of RSI is focused on instructor-initiated contact, since that's a defining characteristic of distance ed versus correspondence courses. But another element of your RSI plan is to be sure students can initiate contact with you when needed. If you're in an asynchronous course in particular, or even a live online, it may mean students are active in the course at any time of day. Does that mean you have to be available to them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Absolutely not. Does it mean students should be crystal clear about when you are available, how you prefer to be contacted, and how quickly you're going to respond to their inquiries? Yes, it absolutely does. So you're going to want to include details about how to contact you. Things like, what are the various methods students might use? I tend to tell my students I would prefer Canvas Inbox because I like to keep everything in Canvas. But if Canvas is down for some reason, it's great to also give them your college email address or your office hours, web conferencing. If you're somebody who is fine with texting or phone calls, give them that information, the Q&A discussion, whatever other ways that they can use to contact you if they need assistance or support or have a question. And then make sure and specify what's your preferred method. As I said, I always tell my students I prefer Canvas Inbox, and if Canvas is down, here's the email I would like you to use. Maybe you want to be contacted in the Q&A discussion for class questions, and then via Canvas Inbox for personal questions. It's, whatever. It is a good idea to keep contact within Canvas as much as possible, so that it is behind a secure environment. There's no FERPA issues, and it's right there when accreditors are doing an audit. And the other thing that's great to include is the expected response time. You may even want to include something like, if you don't hear back from me in 24 hours, assume I didn't receive your email and please resend it. That's a really good way to build in a protection for any kind of email malfunction, so the message isn't floating out there in cyberspace. The last thing you want to have happen is for a student to sit and wait for a response to an email that you never got. Or what I've also had happen is they email you every 10 minutes because they somehow think online means automatic reply. And so you can just let them know in your communication information, you will respond within 24 hours or whatever your time frame is. To encourage student-initiated interaction, your contact information should be easy to find and ideally in multiple places. So on the homepage and in the syllabus and in your orientation module. Everybody's brain works a little differently, so they may not think to go to the one place that you thought was the obvious place to put it. So something that important is nice to have in multiple places. The other thing about student-initiated contact is some students are reluctant to contact an instructor for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're shy, or they've had bad experiences with less than compassionate teachers, or there are cultural differences at play. So I always recommend including verbiage that specifically invites students to contact you. Something as simple as, I care about your success in this class and I look forward to answering your questions, can open the door for those reluctant students. Here's some other ways you might promote RSI in your course. You can offer orientation sessions on Zoom. That might be an orientation to the class in the first week, or topical orientations when you introduce a new unit or concept. You can create at least one check-in activity during that first day or week, like a meet and greet discussion or a wiki page, an icebreaker activity, getting to know you survey. All of those would meet RSI guidelines. Plus, those activities can help you determine attendance data for census reporting. And again, using Zoom, if you are, you can schedule synchronous review sessions or Q&As or virtual field trips. If you're doing group work and students are meeting synchronously as a group in Zoom, have them invite you to drop in so you can answer questions or see their progress. You can record mini lectures, and I'm purposely not saying lecture because I don't want anyone to get the idea that lecturing at students for an hour or more online, even if it's live online in Zoom, is a good thing. But recording mini lectures could qualify as RSI as long as they're coupled with a way for students to ask questions and get guidance from you. Developing instructor-created introductions. They could be video, audio, text, to publisher materials or other supplemental content that you've included in the course also supports RSI. Canvas announcements are a very simple way to address RSI as long as the announcement is instructionally related, like a summary, a clarification, or a resource. As I mentioned earlier, an announcement reminding students about the quiz tomorrow wouldn't count as RSI. An announcement with recommendations on what to review or summarizing a concept that you notice some students had difficulty with to help them prepare for the quiz would count as RSI. You could have direct contact or meetings with individual students or small groups of students about course content or feedback. Definitely constitutes RSI. And that contact can be email, phone, video, Zoom, whatever. And then, as we mentioned earlier, providing meaningful and timely feedback on student work is a very important aspect of RSI. On a side note, if you're using publisher activities or assessments that students access via the publisher website, and those assessments only allow for automatic grading, you would need to augment that with assignments in Canvas that allow you to give individualized, detailed feedback in order for it to qualify as RSI. Automatic grading without any kind of customized guidance, the way you can do in Canvas, where you can add the customized feedback to specific questions or specific answers. That could be RSI, but just auto right wrong in the publisher area would not qualify. And participating in discussion boards, though again, it needs to be instructional. So chiming in on a content-related prompt or answering content-related questions in the class Q&A would qualify. Now, again, all these ideas are going to sound familiar from our discussion of engagement earlier. On a side note, in terms of RSI, you are not required to respond to every individual student in a discussion. But when auditors come looking, you can be sure they want to see instructor participation in discussions. Not doing so is akin to asking students a question in a face-to-face class and then saying, talks amongst yourselves as you leave the room. On the flip side, it's been shown that too much instructor commentary in a discussion can actually squelch student responses. So you want to monitor and guide the conversation as appropriate without taking it over. So you might respond to a few students individually, sporadically throughout the various responses. Or after a few students have responded, you can offer a general reply that kind of summarizes the threads you're seeing in the responses. Or you can offer your own response to the prompt, along with one or two questions that might deepen the discussion that they're already engaged in. So bottom line, instructor to student interaction is required in all online distance education courses. The idea is that students should have frequent opportunities to ask questions and receive answers and guidance from their instructor, meaning you. Again, if you're being intentional about engagement, meeting specific RSI guidelines is probably going to be a piece of cake. Think regular, frequent, and substantive. The more methods of engagement and interaction you include in your course design and communication plan, the better and more effective your RSI is going to be. So I am also going to share one last resource that is another something we created at @ONE. It is a Pocket PD professional development guide on interaction. And so it may have some ideas for both student to student and instructor to student interaction that you'll find useful. So that's really the main information that I wanted to make sure you were aware of regarding interaction and engagement. And so let me check in questions, comments, any particular ways you like to create engagement or interaction in your course.
First of all, I wanted to thank you so much for the presentation. I thought it was really, really useful.
Oh, good.
And I wrote down lots of notes as you were talking. One of the things that I do to introduce a unit is to include a certain amount of storytelling.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
And I wondered if you had any resources on how to make storytelling more effective, or if you had any ideas about that.
I don't know of any specific resources offhand, but I'm going to make a little note to myself to see if I can find some, because what I do know is probably what you know as well. We humans are drawn to stories. It's just the natural way that we like to receive information in a story. It helps us create connections and apply it to our own lives. So the fact that you're doing that is fabulous. Let me see if I can find resources that might give you some information, useful information in enhancing what you're already doing. And I'm just typing a little note so I don't forget to do it.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I had about 3 more questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
One is that I teach English, and I do a process theory-based approach to teaching writing. So there are lots of drafts and things like that. And in on-ground classes, I have these groups of students from all of my sections who come to my office hours. And we go through their papers and I tell them what's strong about it, what they can do to make it stronger.
Right.
So in teaching an asynchronous class, I also have several Zoom office hours every week. And I've noticed I do have a regular group of students who stop by, but it's much smaller. I get in my on-ground classes, and I had I mention the opportunity to students in my syllabus, for example, and certain students who are struggling, or students who write to me asking what some strategies are that they could employ, right, perform better in the class are. And I always invite them to come to my office hours and tell them what they'll look like and how I can help them. But I still just don't get the same volume of turnout. And so I wondered if you had any ideas for how to encourage more students to stop by those office hours.
Yeah. A couple of things that come to mind that I Yeah, is one, a lot of people in the growing conversation around humanizing and equitizing, especially online, is to change the name of them. So it's not office hours, it's, you know, students, I mean, something that's more student friendly and really better communicates. I mean, office hours is kind of a holdover from the whole professor, you know, working away on their research, and then they open up a little window of time when they're going to answer student questions. But we really want to create a different feel to, I'm here to help and support you. So that's one possibility, not saying it's going to resolve everything, but that could be an idea. Another something that came to mind as you were sharing, that an instructor shared with me that they do, actually two things come to mind. One is in the first week or two, and is your course a full-on 16-week, or is it a short course?
It's a 16-week course.
Okay, so because this would work better there. In the first week or two, and he makes it very crystal clear right at the beginning, he requires students to meet with him on Zoom individually for just like a 10-minute icebreaker session. And he's very flexible with the time. He doesn't say, you know, you have to come. He just says, we're going to do this in the first week or two. And so let's individually find a time where we both can meet. And then he does that. I don't know how big your class sizes are, so I don't know if this will work for you. But what he said was, once he has that little icebreaker, and it's truly just, hey, I'm Helen, you know, I'm your professor. This is why I love this topic, you know, blah, blah. And the student just introduces themselves. There's no real agenda to it other than they've now met you and that ice is broken, literally. And so they're more likely to show up and ask questions because they already have a sense of you being somebody that they've met and can talk to. And they, you know, they're not afraid of you the way sometimes they are when you're just a name on the page and a picture and, you know, you're not a real person yet. So that's another idea. And the third one I thought of is possibly, and you'd want to check with your department chair and maybe, I don't know, somebody else at College of the Canyons to see if this is acceptable, but make it clear in your syllabus that you're going to be holding office hours, however often you do, and students need to come at least twice throughout the 16 weeks. And they can figure out which ones work for their schedule, but you know, they need to at least come and check in with you. So especially if it's a student who is perhaps off track and does need some support, but maybe for whatever reason, they don't choose to come voluntarily, at least you've had a chance to meet with them briefly twice throughout the time. The other thing you might do, and you may already be doing it, so I'm not suggesting any of these things are things you're not already doing, but they're just ideas coming to mind, is send out a poll saying, do office hours in the morning work, or in the afternoon, or in the evening, or on the weekend, you know, whatever time frames you're willing to. But it may be that some of the students are working so much other times that they're not available at the times when you're normally holding. And so maybe if you have enough students that say, yes, I need evening office hours, then maybe you can have occasional evening ones. So that might be another way.
No, that's great. I appreciate all the really concrete ideas.
Yeah. And, you know, it's always a hit or miss. And what's interesting is some semesters you get a lot more interaction, and other semesters it's like they all called each other up and said, we're never going to go to office hours. So nobody got, you know, I mean, it's just kind of crazy the way it happens.
So I have two more questions.
Yeah.
One was that one of the student learning goals in English 101, which I'm teaching, is a reading related goal, that students become better critical readers. And I was having a conversation with a colleague the other day about how much easier that is to do in person. Because you can, one of the things you can do is you can put students into pairs where it's a read aloud, think aloud activity.
Right.
And I know Another thing I do on ground is I think of an apprenticeship model, and I'll model, say, close reading a paragraph, so they can see what that looks like before I put them into those pairs. And I could do that online. I could make a video.
Post. Yeah.
Been thinking about doing that, but it seems like I have fewer ideas online of how to help students become better critical readers and how to incorporate more metacognition with that process.
Right.
And I just wondered if you had any ideas about reading in particular.
Two things come to mind. One is students have access to Zoom just the way we do. And so what you can do is create reading buddy pairs and say, you and your reading buddy find two, and I'm making this up because I don't know what your structure normally is, but find 2 15-minute periods this week when you will read to each other on Zoom. And you can either then ask them to let you know when it is so you could drop in, or you can have them record a portion of it, or you can have them, you could create an assignment and have them submit, you know, a 2-sentence summary of how it went as some kind of verification that it's happening, but let them figure out when they're going to do it, and they just do it on one or the other's Zoom room, so that it's still that kind of face-to-face auditory ability to interact in real time. The other option might be to use something like VoiceThread, where, and it wouldn't be in pairs, but you could have students read aloud the paragraph or whatever and record it on VoiceThread and then post it. And it could be a Padlet too, although I don't know how long Padlet lets you record. So that might not work well, because Padlet might be limited to like 90 seconds or something, which wouldn't be enough time. You'd have to explore. But when they post it, you could then provide the class, you could either break them into small groups and they could sort of peer review and offer commentary on the person's reading, or you could do it as everybody, you know, pick 3, kind of like a quasi discussion, pick 3 people's reading and offer feedback. And you could give them either a rubric so they know, or very specific guidelines of here's the kind of feedback that's going to be useful to the reader, so that the reader is having the chance to read aloud and is still getting people to listen and perhaps offer constructive ideas.
Great.
Those are what come to mind for me right now.
Just to follow up on that, I know I jotted down that you had mentioned the VoiceThread.
Yes.
And you also mentioned something called the Answer Garden, and I just wondered what that was.
It is almost like a word cloud kind of thing. So it's not something where you can record video, but it's more like, here's a question and they write a very short reply, and then it sort of creates a page with all of the different responses.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's, you know, it's not useful for everything, but it can be a way of getting engagement and creativity very simply. If you Google any of those, I think they all have like test example things that you can try out to see if it's something that you like, so you have a better sense of what it is that it does.
Okay. My last question had to do with substantive replies and time. So,
say that again, with what?
With giving students substantive feedback and
got it.
Time. So of course, with their formal essays, I write a lot of specific feedback for those, but I've noticed how much longer it takes in an online format to give feedback on other things than it would in the classroom. So for example, when I'm on ground, I break my class up into maybe 3 or 4 segments, and we'll do an activity. And there's a lot of processing of the activity in class, and we all do it together. But when I'm responding to their homework, which they have to do a lot of those activities now.
Individually, yeah.
Yeah, so it takes a lot more time. And of course,
right.
You were talking about discussion boards. And I've been doing what you've been saying about entering into the discussion and making a few different posts.
Mhm.
So before I was responding to students individually, and so that took a lot of time. But so that was one way that I cut down a little bit on the time, by just making a few posts.
Right.
But do you have any other tips for cutting down on some of the time so that it becomes more manageable?
One of the
Aggregate I'm sorry. I've done some aggregate feedback too.
Right.
But I just wondered if you had any other ideas.
You may already be doing it. One of the things I have, I teach a short 8-week course at Coastline, and I have a comment library because I find every semester I'm saying often the same things on each assignment over and over again. So I have, for each assignment, I have a collection of the feedback that I have find myself giving repeatedly so that I can copy and paste it. It's still not totally labor-free, but at least I'm not typing it over and over again. I'm just copying and pasting it and maybe customizing a little as appropriate for that student. Another thing, oh, it just went out of my head. Wow. I had a thought and I just lost it. Okay, substantive, individual. So perhaps, no, I don't know if that would work. Yeah. Let me know if you have another question, because whatever I was going to say went right out of my head. And I'm hoping it'll come back if there's something else that you think to ask me. Yeah, I can't remember.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine. I was just thinking as you were talking about how useful this workshop has been to me.
Oh, good. I'm very glad.
And here I got the opportunity at the end to ask some very specific questions. So
yeah,
I think you've been a wonderful resource.
I'm really glad you found it useful. Yeah. I think the other thing I was going to say about cutting down on the feedback is maybe for your own peace of mind, pick the top 3 things that student really needs to focus on and focus on that. Maybe don't try to catch every little thing on every single assignment, so that, you know, maybe the first 3 weeks you're focused, and I'm making this up, you're focusing on punctuation. And so that's, you know, and you tell them, I'm going to focus on punctuation. And that's the feedback that I'm really going to be strong. And then if there's something else that's glaring that you need to say for a particular student, but that way you may not feel all 16 weeks for every single assignment, you have to comment on every single thing in a very in-depth way. You can focus and then comment more generically about some of the other stuff without having to go into really specific detail. I don't know if that would sit well with you, but that could be a way to balance the need for useful, meaningful feedback without you pulling your hair out because you're spending hours and hours and hours doing it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anything else for today?
That's all. Just, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate your time and have fun with your interaction.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.